never miss a good opportunity to shut up. And that's like a fun lesson that I've been bringing back to clinical practice too. I framed it differently before as like silence can be like a good tool, almost like seeing it through the lens of theater where like your patient is your scene partner and like you let them build the scene more.
How to be patient.
And welcome back to How to Be Patient. We are flying from the seat of our pants today because we will be improvising much of this episode. I'm joined by our co-host, M, standing for Margaret. At Bad
I signed
Art
in under
every day.
M instead
She's
of Margaret.
On the Riverside chat. She's made her name M, which I think it's subtle, it's vague, it's mysterious. I kind of like it. Everything that would be good for a character. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yes, you guys, you heard it right. We are going to try for the first time ever to be funny on this podcast.
Maybe the second time we've tried being funny, but we will be successful. Remember we did those weekend update style jokes?
Yeah. Well, Glaucomflecken didn't give us the approval that we wanted from that. This is a beef in season 4.
And it's tough because I think he really wanted to. Like, I could see it in his eyes. He's like, I want you to be funny. Please, God, be funny right now. And then it was tough.
Unlike you, I cannot be funny on command, so I may struggle with this. But we're going to give it our best shot.
And I think that's a great insight even for the start of this episode, which is that improv is not stand-up. And they, like, for context, everyone, I've been taking improv classes for about like the last 9 months or so at the recommendation of Dr. Glaucomflecken, which is great advice. I think it's been a lot of fun. But they said at the beginning, this isn't about trying to show off the funny. You don't have to like do it on command. It's not a stand-up class. It's about collaboration, working together with people. So even if you're not funny on command, it doesn't matter because it's just about the scene. That's what we'll find out. Improv is excavating. Stand-up is presentation.
What does improv is excavation mean? It's
like we're both paleontologists and we're trying to discover a dinosaur, and I'm uncovering this part over here, and I'm like, look what I found, and you're like, oh, look what I found. Looks like a claw,
okay.
And I'm like, I see a tail. I mean, it's a claw tail kind of creature, and then you're like, wait, I found wings. Now I have to incorporate wings into my perception of whatever this dinosaur is. That's improv.
Cool. That's a cool metaphor.
Yeah.
And how are you? I feel like I'm about to preempt you, but you wanted to do that. You wanted to do it for your own sake when you started. But also, I know you've been making some videos and that this episode is about improv in medicine or psychiatry. So what inspired this episode for you?
Well, I think recently I've noticed that my use of my medical training in improv was how it started, which was I thought my skills as a therapist would make me a good improviser, which they do. But then my skills that I learned in improvisation started translating more into my therapy with my patients, my clinical interactions. And I was thinking, wow, this is so interesting how much faster and more comfortable I am with these exchanges now.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be kind of fun to have a whole episode kind of diving into the reflections and the nuance of those lessons. And this isn't new. There already are like post-grad courses, or for a lot of people at the end of their MS4, they take improv classes. Preclinical students take improv, sometimes in correlation with their OSCEs. So it's been something that's been studied, like using improv and education as a way to help train clinicians. There's also some kind of work that people are doing for actually like TBI and like cognitive rehab with improv, almost like a souped up version of speech therapy. So there are a lot of like really fun ways that improv is being used in medicine already, but I just kind of wanted to, this is through the lens of my personal experience. So I'm not going to come on here as an expert in improv and tell you all the evidence and all the ways that things are helpful, but this is a fun, unique opportunity to say, Preston's been doing this and this is what he learned.
I was watching Kung Fu Panda and you've been doing improv.
Exactly.
Bring them to the podcast. I will say, I do feel like some of the funniest parts of med school were like not improv, but I actually, now that you say that, I think there was like a class like led by a local improv person in med school before OSCEs. And then just some of the things that would come up when you would act out like this patient simulation. Some of the things, I feel like so many friendships in med school are based on like bonding over doing those, and one of you saying the like stupidest thing you've ever said.
Exactly. And it's like, it's even something as dumb as like you mispronounce something. You completely use the wrong word. I think I like misuse like Episcopalian to refer to
Episcopalian?
Episcopalian to refer to an pescatarian.
Oh.
And then because we're really talking about diets. That one stuck with me for a while. Like that was pretty funny. Or like I'm a punny person, and the improv class that I work with, they hate puns. They don't hate them, but like they're groaners. So at my last show, I did a pun. This is on the Patreon. I I put this clip there, but I did this pun, and they cut the scene and then made me go do like they were like, and now Preston will deliver a 45-second apology to the audience as to why he did this pun. And then I wasn't expecting that. It was improvised, obviously. So I go out in front of this humble crowd of 30 people, and I got to plead for forgiveness for using a pun with the spotlight on me. Like stuff like that is fun, and it sticks with you, and they're happy memories. And actually, some people from the class got together and they wanted to form an improv troupe, and
Oh,
so
cool.
I got the invite because I'm a popular, fun
Exclusive.
guy. So like once a week, I've been like practicing
Famously,
with
that
them.
is how popular fun guys refer to themselves in person.
And humble, popular, fun, humble guys.
Humble, handsome, smart, intelligent, prize-winning, unstoppable, tremendous. Never
Took
been
the words
seen,
right out of
never
my
been
mouth.
done.
Not all of them. There's more words that could describe me, but those are most of them.
There are many more words that could describe you, Preston.
So, like all this stuff, it's been fun. I've been enjoying kind of having it as a part of my life. So I wanted to use this as a chance to share it. And that all being said, I think it's time for us to warm up a little bit. That's what we call it in the improv scene. And normally this would be an icebreaker, but maybe this is an ice melter since we're warming up. So I will actually turn it back on you for a second. I want to give you the choice. And I'm purposely not giving you much description here, but I want you to pick between two warm-ups.
Okay.
So we have Top That and Punathon. Those are our two warm-ups. And pick one.
Punt-a-thon or pun-a-thon?
Pun. P-U-N.
Okay. Pun-a-thon.
Punathon? Perfect. So
yeah.
The game of Punathon is essentially a back and forth, almost like tennis match of however many puns you can make about a certain type of topic that gets brought up. And so you solicit something from the audience, and then you just go as hard as you can punning about it. And the improv part is you make up a story or something and then fold it into a pun. So, for example, let's say the topic was cats.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say, "Oh my God, I get so frustrated with my cat. She has like way too many toes on her hand, and she has polydactyly. So when I try to trim her nails, it's just there's always this awkward pause."
Got it.
and then you'd come back with like, well, she's always delaying going out the door by just screeching everywhere. And I'm like, "Ma'am, get over here right meow." Something like that. Kind of understand the vibe of Punathon.
Puns.
Yes, you will die by the
it.
puns. And we basically just keep going until there's nothing left. And then we cut the scene or we solicit one more. Or we solicit another one from the crowd. And we have the crowd here today. The fill-in is Rob, the producer.
Been told he will be here.
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
Doing great. I'm honored to tell you what your topic is today.
So what do you do for work, Rob? No, I'm just kidding. This isn't a crowd work. But Rob, I do want you to give us a type of activity you would do in the evening, like a hobby.
Well, currently I'm painting a lot in the evening, so we'll say arts and
painting.
crafts.
So the topic is painting. I really need to brush up on my painting skills.
I feel like I'm going to be really bad at this. Well, I'd love to talk to you about, I have a friend who loves to talk about art, big kind of like going to all the museums. Their favorite artist, is Van Gogh, more than just like Starry Night. But once you get him started, he'll talk your ear off.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I wanted to get more into painting, especially oil, but I heard that they don't really get any value until after you die. And I was like, where's the Monet in that?
um, Jason, I know you're not going to cut this pausing out because that would be too, that would be getting rid of the point of this. I was going to do a Monet one. And so you, okay, that's
I just stole it.
Yeah.
I stole her Monet.
Yeah, the Monet was under the table. No.
You can still use Monet. Like, it's also kind of funny if you're just like,
well,
you took my Monet, I'm going to say my Monet anyways.
Well, okay. I was watching this TikTok video earlier, and it was like, it was a video. There was an interview from a long time ago of Ryan Gosling and Harrison Ford, who is like famously very grumpy during interviews for movies and projects as he's gotten older. And there was a point where he was talking about art, and then they were talking about like, now I can't land this. I just realized I couldn't land the plane in the middle.
It.
No, I truly can't land it. In the interview, he's just is like, I need to find this clip. He ends with saying, "Show me the money," and I was going to do a Monet one, but I can't do it because I can't land the plane. And I thought it was a stroke of genius, but it wasn't.
That's good.
I landed the plane.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I've been looking at getting like a higher end apparatus to hold my paintings, but like the resale values of these things it's so high up, and everyone that I've been talking to try to get one of these like painting holder apparatuses, they're just terrible. It's an awful market. And then I realized money is the root of all evil.
Okay, can we pick another topic?
Okay. Rob, I want you to give us any kind of form of transportation going from point A to point B.
A good train.
A train. Yeah, the train ones, they'll go off the rails pretty fast.
Margaret seems to be running out of steam.
Oh! Margaret just got pun mogged by Rob.
Feels like I'm falling behind. It feels like I'm the caboose in this conversation.
Okay. Yeah, let me get us back on track.
You already used that. You used the sentence. You used the spirit of that one already.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's true. It's true. What? So, I was in Mexico, and we were all playing soccer, but they call it football down there. And the best thing we had to set up for the net to score was one of those like a train car, and it was filled up with fuel for the train. So when we kicked the ball in there, everyone just yelled "Colasso" instead of "Golasso."
What's a Colasso?
Golasso.
So I have a story to tell you about like one of my like clinical experiences. So I was talking with this patient's family about things that were going on for one of my patients at school. And she like loves playing the trumpet. She's in her like high school band, but she's had like a ton of issues with being in and out of the hospital, and then some behavior stuff that has like gotten her suspended. And one thing that had recently happened was at the start of last school year, they were just getting to meet all of their like new band people and everything going on with like getting started in the year. And she has a reputation. And so they're in band, they're starting to play. They're practicing for this like big football game they had coming up, and their marching band. And I end up hearing about this because they have this game. It's a big first Friday night game. The band is out there, and she loses it on the field and throws her trumpet down just because she missed a note. And she ended up having this whole big thing. And the football coach had to come over to the leader and the teacher of the band. And he was like, "What are you doing? Like, help her, make her do something different. He goes, conductor, I can barely, I barely know her.
Oh my gosh. See that you just did the Monet version of me because I was pulling one of those. I was gonna say I was sitting on a train the other week and one of the employees just grabbed one of the handrails, was immediately electrocuted to death. He was quite the conductor.
Yeah. This reminds me of the Norm Macdonald. I was doing that in the style of Norm Macdonald.
That was great.
And then
conductor, I hardly know her.
Where is this freaking going?
Okay, I think that's good. Unless you want to go for one more.
I think it's the end of the line.
I agree. It's our last stop. So we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to talk a little bit about yes-anding.
Love it. Yes, we will. And here's a break.
Margaret and I are very excited to tell you about a healthcare news podcast that just came out called Medlines.
It's a quick weekly wrap-up of everything in our field, from breakthrough discoveries and research to politics and, of course, medical pop culture.
I think the best way to conceptualize this podcast is it's like NPR's Up First, but for medicine. So they're short, to the point, with episodes no longer than 15 minutes.
And it's written and created by an amazing team, some of whom you might recognize, Dr. Glaucomflecken and Lady Glaucomflecken, as well as many people here at the Human Content Podcast Network.
With thanks for their inaugural sponsor, the New England Journal of Medicine. New episodes of Medlines are out wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes out every Friday. Okay, and we are back to talk about one of the most fundamental principles of improv, which is yes-anding. This is pretty well known to the layperson. So Margaret, what's your understanding of yes-and as a concept?
In improv, you don't necessarily since you're building something together, and that could be anything. Yes, and is that you kind of receive what the other person gives you and build on it, rather than trying to take it by force into a totally different direction or contradicting the shared reality you're making.
Mm-hmm. And the exact antithesis of yes and is no but.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm denying it, and this is why it's not going to work. So the very first exercise we did in the 101 class was party planning. It was plan a party with someone, and every time they add something silly or dumb or nonsensical to the party, you have to say yes and. It would be so cool if we hired 100 clowns into my 500 square foot apartment. Yes. And
I have 500 go-karts that would go perfect with them.
Yes. And we can turn off all the air conditioning.
Because I've always wanted to see 500 sweaty clowns.
Yes, and then
and we'll analyze that.
And then I will go home. Yeah, so it's validating the initial premise. You have to the yes part is saying what you said is true. Because what really kills an improv scene is if I say, "Oh, hello, Margaret, my long-lost sister," and you say, "I'm not your long-lost sister. We don't even know each other.
I'm a sweaty clown."
Yeah, what are you talking about? Then it's oh, the reality doesn't even exist. But you could say yes, but "Oh, Margaret, my long-lost sister," and you're "Yes, I am your long-lost sister, but not anymore."
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And now it's kind of "Oh." It's the reality's right, but you've already contradicted it.
And I feel similarly, it's you could do that maybe once in a while that can happen, but if you kept repeatedly doing that, it would make the improv really not fun and not flowy, I would guess.
And you're guessing right. Because even within the world of yes-anding, you can say something or people can contradict themselves. And it will just not even make sense to the scene. And there's this distinction between non-realistic and unrealistic. So something that's non-realistic is just not operating within the bounds of our known reality. So something let's say we're in a magical realm where gravity isn't real. And also we can talk to plants. Those are non-realistic things. But unrealistic would be, for me to say, oh man, it's been 10 years since I've seen my wife. And then you'd say, didn't you see her yesterday? Oh, right. I did see her yesterday. Or maybe it was a week ago. I don't know. And you're just like, what? Like this is like the person who's like supposed to be important in your life, unless you're like making a whole point about how like nonchalant you are about it. Like those are like very like weird, inconsistent things.
Yeah, I was gonna say it reminds me of like in the fantasy writing world, they talk about like the internal logic has to be very tight, even if it's like an unreality, a fantasy world, a fantasy land,
Right.
whatever. But like you can't be like, we have no gravity, and then only part of the time that applies or something like that in the world you're creating.
Yeah. So in this book, which I guess this is like if you guys are interested, this is the step 1 equivalent for, or what is it, for the first aid equivalent for improv. It's called the Comedy Improv Manual. And they give an example about that where they say they're doing this scene where they're like, 2 dentists, or a dentist and a dental assistant, are going to like put someone under for a root canal. And one dentist says like, let me go get the anesthesia medicine, like the benzocaine to put you under for anesthesia. And then the other dentist goes, I'll be right back with the brick. And the patient's like, why are you going to get the brick? And he's like, the anesthesia is the brick. I'm going to knock you out.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, so you could be living in a world where like, yes, dentists do knock people out with bricks, and that's their way of like putting them under for the tooth. But the other dentist already said he's going to get the medicine. And then like, why would these 2 dentists like not be on the same page at all about like, it kind of like breaks up the scene. It's awkward. And then the other character like calls that out from them. So I think that's kind of a good example of that. The interesting thing though about yes anding is that you can accomplish a lot of the same things from a no but while still saying yes and. And I think that's where it becomes really helpful for like the clinical application of it. You almost have to just, whenever you're conversing with a person, take no but out of your vocabulary and realize that people just respond a lot better to like both the words yes and. So let's kind of like try a little exercise. Let's say I'm making up a trip, like we're planning a road trip. And I say, okay, for the start of the road trip, we are going to drive from where I'm in Texas. We're going to drive from Texas all the way to Tallahassee. We're going to do 20 hours in the first step. The first time, we're just going to do 20 hours straight. And then you would add to that. Try by just saying no but, like no but, and then change the trip however you want.
I don't think so, but we can bring your 2 cats along and I'll give you halfway to Arkansas.
See, I don't like that because you told me no, and now I'm only in Arkansas, not Florida.
But you have your 2 cats.
Right. And what if you said that with yes and? You were like, yes, we can go to Florida and we can stop at Arkansas on the way.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a second. You're agreeing with me, but you're not.
Yeah.
I'm so confused. I don't know what to do. It
reminds me of like in motivational interviewing when we talk, and just in general, when we talk about like reflective statements, that there's a similarity there. That's kind of like, there's always a little bit of at least yes. But it's like, I like where you're going. And even though I'm going to say we have to go a different direction, here's the part that I think that you brought up that we can keep or something like that.
Yeah, it's how you want to order the change talk and the sustain talk. And the yes part is the validating, and the and part could be the change talk. Where if I'm talking to you about smoking and I tell you that like the only thing I look forward to in my day is my smoke break, like you have to yes and that. You know,
yes,
the only thing you look forward to
me about this,
and you're thinking about quitting.
Have other thoughts on it too. Yeah. Yes, this is an important part of your day, and
you're worried about your health effects on your family.
Yeah. Yes, and
so
no but.
Instead you could be no
and
but.
And you're a bad person. No, and you're stupid.
Yes, and fuck you. Like, wait a second. I don't know if yes and is that powerful that it can protect all that.
You're gonna love what I have to say next.
Yeah, but instead of being like, smoking is the only thing to look forward to during the day. No, but you're thinking about its health effects on you. Even just like subconsciously playing that in my head, I'm responding to it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's almost like just steal that verbatim. And I think just knowing that you have to yes and everything the patient says, it's gonna set you up for like a good like MI approach.
Yeah, and not just from like I think I could hear this as a patient and be like, so my doctor's just trying to butter me up. I think legitimately there is something like valid that you can yes most people and what they're trying to advocate for themselves. And so I just want to say, like, similar to when we had the MI talk, this yes and is about encompassing both realities and like truly valuing the part that someone else values while also adding on to it in this metaphor, clinically speaking. Just, I think sometimes people hear that and they hear that we have a bag of tricks that we like mischievously throw over our shoulder as therapists or psychiatrists, and then we're like trying to like trick them or sneak them into something. And so I just want to say that out loud because I don't want it to come off that way.
I think that's a great point. I also don't see it as a bag of tricks. I think I see it as a way to be more transparent. Because ultimately we are trying to be helpful and validate. And then it's in the way we communicate that desire that we stumble. So this is a way to make it like clear to the patient that we do think that their concerns are legitimate and we recognize and appreciate that there's tension here. That's what the yes is. It's ultimately a validating statement.
Yeah.
Okay. So not to belabor yes and much longer, but there's more stuff I want to get to. So the next thing that I found kind of interesting is there's this concept of a montage in like some of the improv like sets we do. So basically for like a short form show, you have like a couple different scenes based off of like suggestions from the audience. So one scene might be, a high school couple on a date at a carnival. And then, but it turns out that the hot dog guy is all out of hot dogs. So he's just, I don't know, selling like ketchup and mustard with like a funnel cake in the middle. And then they're navigating the tension of eating something like that. Like, it's weird. And then the next one is like a bunch of astronauts who are trying to walk on the moon, but they realize that they all forgot their helmets or something. So like those are these really random different scenes. But then what you do at the end is you go around and you add context to those. And you create like a montage. So for the carnival scene, you might even say like, and cut to when the carnival guy was purchasing his supplies, and then the scene will come up, and then he's like, "Yeah, I think 5 hot dogs is probably good enough for the carnival. How many people are even going to be here?" Yeah, you're already laughing, right? Because then it gives us like an idea of how he came to this spot where he's completely out of hot dogs at like 6 p.m. Or it's like cut to when the astronauts are packing, and then he's like, "Hey man, how many pairs of underwear are you bringing?" Like, "Oh, probably like 100, 200. You can't be too safe." And he's like, "Oh man, I'm really starting to run out of room in my suitcase here." And like, "Yeah, well, it's not like we would probably forget anything important." Something like that.
Yeah.
Or helmets. Who would have thought? But what's kind of important about these like montages that you put together, these scenes that you create, is you need to know when to cut the scene. So you can kind of watch two people, like they flounder. They're trying to excavate like that metaphor we used earlier, but they're really finding nothing. Like
they're finding dirt.
Yeah. It's like when you're fishing and you're like, "Oh, I've got one." And I'm like, wait, the tension is consistent. And then you really pull and it's just like a clump of moss or something. When you realize that they've got moss on the other end of that line, then you kind of say like, "Okay, cut the scene." And what we'd literally do is we'll run across the stage and that cuts the scene. And the rule is if you cut the scene, you have to start the next montage.
It's like in Whose Line Is It Anyway when they would hit the buzzer.
It's exactly right. Like it's the buzzer and Whose Line Is It Anyways. And I found like it's a skill though, watching the scene and saying like, "Oh, there was some kind of conflict between these characters. Then something was revealed and this became humorous, and then there's resolution." And you kind of look for those like little hills and valleys, because multiple iterations of that can happen throughout a scene, but you need to, over the course of 30 seconds to 90 seconds, figure out like when to cut it. And I kind of realized that the same thing on a larger scale can apply to like clinical conversations. So there are times when you have like a therapeutic utterance or reflection or something that can like enhance insight for the patient, but talking more about it or belaboring it can be like counterproductive.
Yeah.
And sometimes things hit harder or are more effective if you cut the scene, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like a sense of the kind of pathos and timing of the narrative you're kind of co-building. It sounds like in improv, but also I would say the same is true in like therapy or primary care, just with different timing and sets a little bit in terms of what's expected for it.
Yeah, and in a more literal sense, even just like if you go into the patient's room because you're trying to talk to them about their order of protective custody and they're irate and they just curse at you and they start they throw a milk carton at your head, you're like, this is a great place to cut the scene.
Where did they get the milk carton from? 5 hours
probably
earlier.
From their lunch tray, I guess. That's like another thing too, that like sometimes it's good to just like terminate the whole encounter. And honestly, like the rapport that you can build with that patient is probably has a better chance if you like give them space and then let them cool off and then come back and talk to them again the next day instead of like trying to like force your way in and then eventually like now they have to get emergency medications. I mean, a launched milk carton will probably result in emergency medication regardless, but the intent's there that like if someone's already like angry, I'm not going to rile them up and realize like the scene has run its course. And the other part of it, I think, would be like within conversation. So, like, if somebody is like venting about a family situation or they're talking about like their job, like some of those topics you can kind of just spin your wheels on ad nauseum. And so also figure out like this topic, like, and scene for that topic. Like, you have some kind of like good summarizing statement or reflection, and then use that as a way to say, like, okay, what is the next subject I want to like move things on to?
And sometimes you're scening against your scene partner's will.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Trying to figure out a way to do that again in the frame of like what time do we have? What can we accomplish? Like, let's say, I guess the metaphor or similar thing would be like you're an opener and you have 10 minutes, like you don't have 60 minutes or a full show. So we gotta one of you is aware of that and one of you is maybe less aware of that. And that's what's happening in primary care all the time.
And you're yes-anding them and you're hoping that they yes-and you back when you're when you're like, and medication side effects. Yes.
And
let's talk about those medication side
messages
effects.
that you were worried about this thing, and we have 2 minutes left.
You reposted a meme on your story the other day. It was like the it was like the Bernie Sanders, and he's like, I am once again asking you to apply your judgment and not open up your telehealth appointments while driving.
I got a lot of DMs about that one after. They're like, why do people do this?
I've logged into a telehealth appointment and been in someone's propped up against someone's grocery cart in the cereal aisle.
At least they aren't going to probably die doing that.
Yeah, very true. I'm like, is this okay with you? They're like, yeah, people in the grocery store can hear, I don't care. Like,
you're like, okay, maybe we're a little too casual right now, but
like, all right. But that's the thing, like, you're like, yes, I'm so glad that you're driving and let's pull over right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the added part clinically is like sometimes that conflict or that like no is also therapeutic and purposeful, which I see less of a role for in improv. Like someone messaged me related to that meme. Someone messaged me and goes, how, like, do you have this happen all the time too? And I go, no, because a lot of my patients think I'm strict because I pretend to be strict for the first couple of visits. But I don't think being strict is probably has a pro in improv.
I think having them think that you're strict.
But that's different than actually being like than like being, I don't know. Yeah.
Ending the scene is good, and then not dominating the scene has been also like helpful for me. I don't tend to talk all the time, but I think I can be like kind of a ham when I get on like on stage and I'm like interacting with people, and it's called a gift when you introduce a new premise. And I'm just a gift giver. I'm throwing a bunch of stuff out there, and I realize that like the scene goes better, or sometimes it's like easier to interpret ambiguity if you just shut up. So I'd almost like tell myself like never miss a good opportunity to shut up when you're on stage. And that's like a fun lesson that I've been bringing back to clinical practice too. I framed it differently before as like silence can be like a good tool, but almost like seeing it through the lens of theater where like your patient is your scene partner, and like you let them build the scene more. Like don't even try to like jump to an interpretation. Just kind of
I was going to say, it reminds me of
there's
this Winnicott piece where he says, I shudder to think of all of the patients whose like well-being I interrupted by insisting on an interpretation, like, which is functionally the same thing except for British and written in the 1950s of like, I shudder to think about when I disserviced their silence. That was actually better than whatever the hell I had to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know why, but that's reminding me of that like Ronald Reagan quote where he's like the 7 most feared words in the English language are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Oh.
I don't know why that lands similarly to me, but all right, and it's cool though because you can yes and without saying anything.
Mhm.
Like I could say like in the scene like, "Wow, Margaret, you've been super calm ever since you got stung by that bee," and you could like reveal without saying anything that you've been stung by a bee, or that you're like lathering yourself with cream or something, like things that acknowledge the premise and move it forward without being like needing to talk. And the same applies to like even just like your body language when you're going through a scenario with a patient. Like you can show your genuine reaction to what's happening, and that's like yes anding the patient, being validating without needing to offer your interpretation or your analysis.
Yeah. Well, and that the clinically like a nod, a body language cue and not filling the space, especially when someone's anxious and they really don't want to talk about what they're about to talk about, is definitely a response of the physical version of go on, say more, as I like to say, which
Yeah.
my patients get sick of me saying.
Say more.
Say more.
It's good. All right. Well, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about last couple kind of connections. And then if you are a Patreon subscriber, we'll be doing some scenes with the suggestions of Rob. So try our best at some live
Lord,
improv.
help me.
Okay. We'll be back in a little bit. Okay. And we are back with a couple more silly improv tactics that may actually be helpful in the clinic as we yes and our way along. And
you know what I'm surprised you didn't start this episode with is one of the great questions that is often asked on TikTok, which is, what is your favorite clinical bit to lead with or end with?
Yeah, I saw a lot of people doing that. That feels more like stand-up.
Okay,
actually.
fair. But
like I remember seeing some.
But you don't do it the same way every time. Like, I feel like those bits are like very dependent on the person in the room. Like, I don't know. I hear you saying that it's like repetitive. Maybe it's like it feels like a starting prompt sometimes of how they'll respond. But continue with our planned points.
Yeah, but I think it is a good point. Like I think people they're thinking of like sketch comedy or like quips going back and forth with the patients. And you know how you were saying earlier, like it gives patients the idea that we have like our own little bag of tricks. I actually think when you talk about like your one-liners or your bits that you lead into, that actually I think makes it seem more like the bag of tricks kind of thing, because it's like it's like stating this is a performance and I have a bunch of boilerplate jokes that I'm going to throw at you, just like I do with every other patient.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think at least for psych, people have more of a negative connotation of us being manipulative and secretive. And so I'm more worried about people thinking that I'm like emotionally doing something to them than every single kid calls me Dr. Dunkin' Donuts. And so I lead with something about donuts, and it's a different one each time.
That's good.
And / people don't compare within patients. So I don't know. I think there's more. What I've heard from people is more like the feeling of not wanting to be judged by psychiatrists or therapists and stuff like that. Because also, especially psychiatrists, actually.
People just don't like being judged by psychiatrists.
People just don't like psychiatrists. And honestly, girls, sometimes fair.
Yeah,
But
very real.
I guess I also think for a lot of people, the bit things are like disrupted, like something small and sort of funny that you work with. I don't know. I guess they also evolve.
Nuggets to bring levity to an otherwise like pretty dreadful encounter. That being said, I think my favorite bit during peds was to ask people what they had ask kids what they had in their ears, like if they're going to find bats or something, or nickels. I did intern year for a while. I would have a bit I would do with patients where when I would tell them that they're going to go get like a study done, like an MRI, or they're going to go get a procedure done, I'm like, yeah, so like you're going to go get your MRI done this afternoon. It's going to be in the basement. And it's really cool. Like you won't even have to like walk there or anything. They're just going to come like push your bed. And the patient's been here. They've been here for months. They've like traveled. They're like, yeah, I get it. And I'm like, yeah, isn't that amazing how they just like move stuff around here? And I would just lean into how like dry it is. Like I'm like so amazed and surprised.
Did they know you were doing a dry joke?
No, yeah, they would.
I'm just picturing like someone like half delirious and you sardonic.
No. It would always be for like a peer type patient, like a contemporary patient,
yes.
like someone
that
like
makes sense.
like early mid-30s or like late 20s. And I'm just like, yeah, no, it's like really cool. We have this whole service that'll come,
medicine.
and then like these dudes will just like push your bed, and your bed has wheels on it too, so it just like it doesn't even hit bumps or anything in the hallway. You don't have to move, but they'll take you downstairs.
Why did you stop doing this bit? Psych is blessed. You're not. That's not happening.
because intern year had a lot of internal medicine patients, and then once we moved on to psych, it just didn't really apply as
Didn't
well.
apply anymore.
Yeah. Single tier.
One of my bits in psych is when someone's like, sorry, but I don't like this medicine. And I'll be like, I didn't invent it. So you're good, girl. Tell me about why you don't like it.
That's good. Yeah, I did invent it. I have no stock in this medicine.
Yeah. Damn, they were going to pay me before that. No, they aren't. Okay, I took us off track. Yes, and Preston's next point.
The next point was focus on the relationship, not the thing. So it's a really common trap or like reflex when you're building an improv scene that you become obsessed with like the object that's connecting you two as characters. So a great example could be like you're in a scene, like the scene is like, we were like, Rob, give us a suggestion. And Rob goes, the Arctic. And that's our suggestion. So now we're in the wilderness and we're trying to build a fire. And the whole scene just becomes about us trying to build the fire. And I'm like, go get these sticks. And you're like, okay, I got the sticks. And I'm like, oh, I can't figure out the flint. Darn it. Do we have anything else that we can use? And you're like, I'm not sure. I didn't check anything. Like those scenes become like pretty boring pretty fast because ultimately like the audience, like they don't care that much about the thing. People always care about like the stakes. That's like what draws someone to a story is the stakes. So there's some implied stakes, which are if we don't get this fire going, we're going to die. So that's a good way to add stakes to it. But if the whole thing is just like about building a fire, then it loses its spark.
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
Back. Yeah. There's not as much oomph to it. But instead, you can use the thing as a way to focus on the relationship and build the relationship between the characters. So you could say, oh, why was this your idea for a honeymoon? And then I introduce to the audience, like my gift is that we're an unprepared couple who thought it'd be a good idea to elope to the Arctic.
You promised me you worked on your pyromania. You promised me. It was in the vows.
But the couples therapist they were on back order and my credit card kept getting declined. I've been trying, but it's not enough. Like, now we've introduced like some tension to it. Now it's interesting. You're like, like, why'd she marry a pyromaniac? And you can even say like, why would I marry a pyromaniac? my mother was right.
All this pyromania and no fire to keep me warm. Classic, just like your father.
Yeah. It's like, well, kind of funny that you keep ending up with Capricorns and pyromaniacs, huh? Let's not put this all on me.
Moths to a flame, baby.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's it? Where there's smoke, there's fire. That's what makes it interesting, and the same kind of applies to your like clinical encounters. And I think this one is more unique to psych because I think for a lot of like standard body medicine, just not to be too reductionary, encounters you can like very much focus on the thing, but I think sometimes it also becomes too much about the thing, and if you could just fix the thing right away, like that's awesome, but that's not probably 80% of medicine.
Yeah.
I would say there's like 30% of the time you're like, this is a very like, let me look at the thing. This is very straightforward. I will solve this problem for you. But the rest of the time, it's gonna be something that's gonna be stuck with you. So you need to go back to your relationship with the person. And this actually kind of almost, before we get into the psych aspect of it, it's making me think about even like when we had like Lady Spine Doc on here, and she was talking about spine surgeons deciding when to operate on a patient with their back pain. Like, I think that's a great example. Like, you can, if you're the surgeon in that case, you can focus on the thing, which is, do I do the operation and your back pain? Like those two things. But if you pivot and focus on the relationship, the thing that like makes the scene matter to the person, like that's going to be more effective in kind of coming to a resolution or a solution, because these aren't problems that you can just solve like that. And,
Right.
and that's pretty much all of our cases. We don't have.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting to think about it from like in a therapy perspective, like, or not even therapy, but like if you have a patient where it's like they come in, they've been doing really well on medicine, and then they come in the next time they see and they say, Doc, my medicine's not working anymore. We have to change it. And you spend the first 25 minutes of the visit talking about the medicine, and you get into these details that are like really deep diving into maybe I had a little bit of whatever. And then at the end of it, they tell you they just found out like that their parent has some form of cancer. And it's like, that's not to say people aren't valid in asking us for things, but it's why taking a holistic view, ourselves included, right? Like you can't psychiatry or therapy yourself. Like there's no auto doing it. Like taking in the whole picture and not getting too fixated on one particular thing is our job, like when we're doing it well. And so I think that the idea of even just in in our work, like coming more from the patient side of, or either of us getting stuck on, no, we need to talk about this thing has to be the thing that we change, or this thing has to be the reason, and zooming out and saying like the whole thing, the relational part, all of this together at once instead of getting kind of concrete.
Yeah, exactly. And then with that, I think you brought a good example up, which could be amplified by you even saying like the patient they trust that you're in like a collaborative relationship or something. So you could even say like, do you want to work on this? Like getting meta, saying like, do you want to work on this now in the context of everything that's happened? Like that's a great step back to ask about the relationship, right? Because I'm not saying like, what about the side effects? What about the ineffective part of the medication? It's, do you and I thou, want to address this problem right now?
No objectifying in our psychiatry.
Right. And like that's what like kind of gets at like the more I guess I want to use the word efficient, but I don't think that's like best there. I think it's more accurate probably.
Yeah. The word that's coming to mind was like seeing, like correctly seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also true. And I think the focusing on the relationship is also helpful when there's a misstep or if there's like a loss of rapport. So we do kind of like a group supervision for our psychotherapy training. And one of my co-residents, she didn't want to prescribe one of her patients a benzo. And it was kind of one of those situations, I think everyone in mental health has had one of these intakes where the patient comes in and the chief complaint is expectation to be prescribed Xanax.
Yeah.
And like this was, I think, a really challenging encounter because the like my co-resident really wanted to focus on the symptoms that were like leading to the patient to request the benzodiazepine, but the patient was very fixated on the benzodiazepine. And ultimately it ended with her saying like, I'm not going to prescribe this to you. And the patient terminated early and like stormed out. And it was, called her a bunch of like terrible names, like you're the worst effing doctor I've ever had, like stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
So it was really hard on her and we kind of debriefing with it. And then the next week, the patient rescheduled and was like showing up again. And they were really confused, like, why is the patient doing this? And my supervisor goes, well, the patient's obviously ambivalent. They said all these things about how they don't like you. They left early, and also they're coming back. Like, there's inconsistency there, and it's going to be your like inclination to like want to go back to focus on the thing, or they're going to want to bring up the thing, but start with the relationship.
Yeah, I think that's
so when they come back in, even like the first thing, like the opening line being like, you're probably still upset with me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's a great way to just break the ice and acknowledge like the relationship is why you're here. And it doesn't have to mean because it's like a positive, great collaborative relationship. Sometimes it's tense, but that's still the thing to focus on.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So those are things I kind of think about too, and it's helpful. Like when you realize there's conflict building up with the patient, I'm like, okay, focus on the relationship, because I know my instinct's going to be to focus on the thing. Okay. And then, yes. And my last one, as we kind of wrap up here, is I'm going to call it pimping delicately, but ultimately it's pointed or passive observation. So there's this concept in improv.
I'm gonna but you can use it. I know we still use it.
Yeah. Well, no. So improv calls it pimping. Actually.
Oh, really?
I was so thrown off. Like our instructor goes, "Don't be afraid to pimp your your scene partners." And I was like, "What? Say that word again. What did you just say?" and I think they've borrowed it from medicine, but pimping is essentially when you as a character in the scene like declare something about yourself and the other person like calls that out. So for example, like I'm telling you that I'm from Texas and I talk like this because I'm from, I don't know, I'm Texan Preston and I know Texas through and through. So if you wanted to pimp me, you'd be like, you even just open up with, what part of Texas are you from? All right, I'm from all over Texas. And then, or you'd be like, what's your favorite Texan city? All of them. Every single city I love equally. Like that's or there's like funnier ones like and even just like with the accent, right? So my accent might start like this, and then it kind of ends up a little bit more like this.
Your accent's changing. You feeling okay?
Yeah. Like you all right, bro?
A different part of Texas active
like
right
what
now.
What part of Texas are you from? Alabama, like Montgomery.
From Paris, Texas.
So what's funny is that like they'll prime, like it kind of primes you like when you go into the scene to just watch the other person and point out things about them, and even like small like little ticks that they have or phrases that they say. You know, like you keep saying this thing, or like this is kind of confusing. There's have you ever seen Semi-Pro with Will Ferrell? There's a scene in that movie where it's just like a bunch of the guys, it's like the 70s and the guys are all playing poker around the table. And one guy's like, I think he's like packing tobacco or something, like putting in dip. And one of the guys like, why are you always using that dip? And he's like, what's the only thing that could get my mind off the shit when I was in the war? Like when he was in Nam. And then the other guy goes, was the shit in Ann Arbor? Because that's where you were during the war. It's a great example of pimping somebody. and what's fun, and that's also a great way to yes and them. Like he could have no butted, like, no, but you weren't in the war. You were in Ann Arbor during the war. But he said, yes, you were in the shit. And was that shit in Ann Arbor? Because that's where you were during the war. So he actually, like, he completely flipped the premise while still yes-anding him. And which I think, like, those are like the kind of the really like eloquent super moves that you can do in improv. But the concept of like monitoring your scene partner and then pointing out things, and you don't even have to interpret them or comment on them, pass judgment on them. You just have to state them back. Like, as simple as like you said, your accent's changing a lot. Let them deal with it. let them offer an explanation for why their accent's changing.
I will say this is one of my favorite therapy moves, and my original like mentor in residency did it a lot. But like, especially if there's like conflict that I think that the patient doesn't want to bring up, especially if it's like a long-term patient, that we like have more of an established therapeutic relationship, is I will say like, I noticed at the end of our last visit, you usually end by saying this, and last time it was different, and you did this instead, and it felt kind of abrupt. Am I reading that right? And then like offering kind of soft openings to things, especially if it's maybe being avoided or pushed down. So the noticing and then like asking them to expand into a detail is
while also saying like, I could be way off here. Like, it softens the interpretation too, which you don't necessarily need to soften the interpretation when you're doing a scene with someone, but I do think like you're doing there is helpful.
And I could be wrong.
A clinical encounter.
Right? Like,
we could all be wrong all the time.
And so, but the like noticing, I also think it communicates something in medicine, not just psychiatry, of like, I'm paying attention to you. Like, you are occupying my attention, and I am not split-minded in 800 different places. Like, you matter to me. Like, I am here with you, and I notice even the small things about you, which I think is important, especially when you're seeing someone regularly for therapy. They, in many ways, feel that they have your full presence.
Yeah. To add on to that, one thing that I've been zeroing in on lately is intonation. So you ask someone like, how are things going with your boyfriend? This is what we've been talking about the last couple of sessions, and they hit you with this. Good.
So when I hit them with a girl, what was that sigh? Literally, I will say to my patients, girl, what's the sigh?
Yeah. You're sighing a lot when you say that. Like,
your sigh is from Texas, girl. What's going on?
Yeah. Tell me about that sigh. Like, that's the correct observation. Where I think even like a couple of years ago, or even as a student, I'm like, so I'm hearing things are going good. No, you're not. You're absolutely not hearing that things are going good. Like you said the word good. That would be a great response. Well, you said the word good.
That would be a great response.
Knowing full well that things are not good. Yeah, or I'll say like, you really drew out that O there. The O and good got a lot of hang time.
This is also when I would say something like, would you like me to comment on the way you said that, or would you like me to F off? This depends. I feel like I literally, depending on how like
that's really
Gen
good.
Z they are, like, would you like me to comment on that, or would you like me to keep it moving on to a different topic? And then we laugh, and then they often stay with it.
And then you say, I'm screenshotting this and saving it for later. I'm going to screenshot that and we'll talk about it later.
Yes, exactly. But I'm going to save it to be TBR. We can read into that later.
Yeah, like this, it's so helpful, and it's easier to do because I think it takes the burden of like needing to offer interpretations to everything. Because sometimes, like, I think the good with the big sigh, like that's a pretty obvious one, but sometimes people will say stuff and you're like, I actually don't know how you feel about this.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to tell you what I saw and how you said it.
Yeah. I mean, I like Winnicott. I love to not interpret. I like to just say, like, did that mean anything? What do you think? Like,
yeah, exactly. Did that mean anything? And that's what you're saying to your scene partner when you're like, why do you keep scratching your nose? Like, are you going for something with your character, or is that just you? Okay. That was the last one.
So the 4 were the yes and was first.
Yes and.
Yes and, where you keep building on something with someone and kind of try to make the same thing. And you can also do that with your patients. The second one was when to cut the scene, cut it out, and kind of having a sense for the timing in improv and like when it's working, when it's over, when it's reached its arc, which also occurs in our clinical medicine encounters, especially psychiatrists, but I would argue like you did everywhere. The third is pimping? No.
Relationship.
Okay, focus on the relationship and kind of
not the thing.
The tension, not the like concrete single thing. Don't get overfixed on it.
Like you're doing object work. But remember, it's a relation. It's object relations. At the end of the day,
it's not thou. It's on it. And then it's the pimping, which I don't like using as a word still but kind of calling people out, pointing, observing, pointing, noting,
clocking tea,
hashtag noticing, as they say on Twitter. Clocking the tea.
We'll just call it clocking.
Have you seen this? It's just the hashtag noticing. Just a comment.
No, that's funny.
That is half of therapy. I'm hashtag noticing. And I think that that's all right. I also think for people who are like in earlier parts of training or transitioning to parts of care they're not used to, as you practice like improv, I would presume you get better at being in this like strange new place. Like we know this from talking to a patient once and then that versus the 10th visit. We have much more like ability to predict and flow with one another. But I think what you're showing also is what you learn in improv can be applied to also figure out how to navigate in the moment uncertainty and in relationship and making a story together. Because I think that's so much of medical training is being like, how do I do this in this space with other people?
Yeah, and so much of just being a human. The things I didn't touch on, I guess, bonus round is commit to the bit.
Period.
Like you have to, no matter what you're doing in improv, like if you're going for the Texan accent, you just got to do the Texan accent. You can't back out now. And the same goes to any kind of like interaction that you're having. It's just a way to show integrity and honesty.
Yeah, if you're going for the Monet, go for the Monet.
Yeah, right. even if you're chewing their ear off, telling them about it, and if it's it'll make a Russian leave. He'll be like, Ivan, go.
I'll be, and you know what? You'll be able to say that train has left the station. And you if you want more of this, you can come to our Patreon.
Which we will be transitioning to right now.
You can catch the next part of this on Patreon.
It's patreon.com/happypatientpod. Thanks again for listening. We are your hosts, Preston Roche and Margaret Duncan. Our executive producers are me, Preston Roche, Margaret Duncan, Will Flannery, Kristen Flannery, Aaron Corney, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brooke. Our editor and engineer is Jason Portizo. Our music is by Omer Benzvi. If you want to hear more from the pod, we are on Spotify and Apple Pods. Anywhere you get your podcast, you want to see us on video, we are on Spotify and YouTube as well. You can find us over on that channel at It's Presro. You can find Margaret at Bad Art Every Day. She is on Substack, on TikTok, and Instagram as well. Follow How to Be Patient on our shared Instagram page. It is our growing Neopet where we dump a lot of our clips there and let you guys know about new episodes.
Talk shit as well.
And
shout out to the Mass General thoracic surgery intern lab, like internship program. They had me come give them a lunch talk that was just asking about psychiatry. There are a bunch of pre-meds in undergrad or in gap years. And that was this week. Awesome. And it was lovely. And shout out to Megan and Mo. Mo in particular, I think you are a regular listener of this podcast and apparently was too nervous to cold email me to ask about this. So Megan did it. So shout out to Megan. Lean in, girl.
Love you, Megan. Love you, Mo.
Being one of our day ones.
Shout out to all the students that rotate with me that like drop that they listen to the podcast. It's like such a compliment. Because I think I always forget that people know about it outside of TikTok or that like are in the medical space. So keep listening, guys.
This is not just some random thing we do and that no one ever hears.
Yeah, it's
Rob,
not
our producer's like, girl, you better think people listen to this.
It's not a game we play on Spotify.
This is like a fun...
To us, it's like it's a mobile game where we put out an episode on Spotify and see what comments come back on.
Literally. We'll see you next time in the Spotify comments.
We will. To learn more about our program disclaimer and ethics policy, submission verification, licensing terms, and our HIPAA release terms, go to howtobepatientpod.com or reach out to us at howtobepatient@human-content.com with any questions or concerns. How to Be Patient is a human content production.
Thank you for watching. If you want to see more of us, or if you want to see, this is Lilac, she's my cat. She's going to be waving her hand at one of the floating boxes, which will lead to more episodes. Lilac, point to the other episodes. Lilac doesn't know what the internet is, but I swear they're there. They probably exist for real. But in the meantime, I'm just going to pet Lilac, and then I'm going to go dance in the background.